Hello and welcome to another episode of Beer Man Snowball Beer Reviews. I'm really excited for this review because this is a beer that is, at least for me personally, is kind of like 10 years in the making. So this is from Founders Brewing Company out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I went to Founders, I think it was like 2009 or 10. So that's why I said it's almost 10 years. I think, I'm trying to think of what, it was actually after Dark Lord Day. I went to Dark Lord Day. I went up into Michigan, went to Founders, Dark Horse, Jolly Pumpkin, Bell's, and then back home. But they had this beer on tap then, and not too long after that, they started their backstage series, and I had always hoped that they did this in the backstage series because, in my opinion, this would be the easiest one to do because it doesn't have any extra additives or anything in it. But what this is their Founders Imperial Stout. This is the bourbon barrel aged version of it. It's part of their Mothership series. So I guess this Mothership series is just one-off things, kind of like the backstage series, but these aren't getting distributed. They're just at the brewery. But I don't know why they never did this with the backstage series. This would sell like crazy across the country. It makes no sense that they did CBS like 3 times when they could have just done this, and I bet it would be cheaper because they didn't have to get the maple bourbon barrels or put coffee in it. But that's just my own opinion. But like I said, this is one that I've been anticipating to have again for a really long time. So I'm really excited. I also recently got a hold of some bottles of barrel-aged Expedition from Bell's, which in my opinion, the 2 best Imperial Stouts, plain Imperial Stouts, not barrel-aged, not with anything in it, are Founders Russian Imperial Stout and Bell's Expedition. And I did those not side by side in the same review, but I did them back to back. I had some vintage bottles of both of them, and I did them together. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to try to do a review of the Expedition pretty shortly after this, just to do a nice side by side while this is still in my memory. But I'm really excited about this. So like I said, it's their barrel-aged Imperial Stout, and it is 12.8. So, and I guess I didn't notice because I don't actively seek out the regular version as often as I should. But they made it sound like they haven't made the regular version of this in a couple of years, which is interesting. Obviously, they made this probably last year, but didn't release any of it. It probably all went into this because if it's been in barrels, then it's, But they just released the version of the regular too, so I'm gonna try to grab some of that if I can. The other thing that's strange too, which you generally don't see with production breweries, especially ones as big as Founders, the fill on this is really high. It was like way up here, which just is kind of odd. Something I noticed. Oh, that is oily and thick. Pretty excited for that. So as you can see, it pours a very dark brown to black color with a nice darker brown or darker beige to brown head. Excuse me. That smells really good. It's so weird. Like, maybe there's certain things in KBS that make me think are attributes from the coffee. What it's actually attributes from the base beer and the bourbon. Because smelling this, it actually reminds me of a lot of KBS. I mean, there's definitely that roasty, chocolatey character, but it almost comes off like the roast character to me almost comes off as coffee. And I'm certainly getting the bourbon. And the coffee character, and generally what I do get out of KBS too is almost coming off as like nutty, which is interesting. Wow. So that really I will admit it's actually really similar to what I was hoping for and is like thinking that it was going to be. So I would say fresh, if I'm going to do a comparison again between Founders and Bell's, I probably like Expedition better fresh, only because it's a little bit of heftier beer. It's definitely more abrasive. But Founders is pretty abrasive itself, and it's pretty roasty. The difference is Expedition with a couple years on it is still pretty abrasive, just because it's such a massive beer and it's so hopped. But with a couple years on the Founders, it really turns into something outstanding. That's so different from the base. It pretty much turns into chocolate milk. I don't know how it's so chocolatey, but so I was kind of thinking and hoping that this was going to be like the chocolatey base that you get from the aged beer with some nice bourbon character, and that is exactly what it is. There's so much rich dark chocolate. So this is, antithesis is the wrong word, but this is very different from the Bell's one, from Bell's Barrel Age Expedition. And I'm not going to say that I like it more or less. It's kind of hard for me to say because I love the Expedition one, but the Expedition one is kind of like, all right, well, we took this massive stout and we aged it in these super wet barrels, but we know that the stout can hold up to those wet barrels because it's such a massive stout. So you get a lot of the stout, still in some of the hoppy character, but there's a huge wash of bourbon. This is kind of the opposite of that, where it's like they're saying, we know how good this base beer is. We just want the bourbon character to round it off, add a nice little nuance and additional flavor, but we don't want it to be like super barrel driven. So that's kind of the difference between the two. And again, like I said, I haven't done a review for the Bell's Barrel Age Expedition, but I do have some bottles to do one, and I drank one with a friend not too long ago. So I'm pulling some comparisons just off of that. That was like 2 months ago. But I'll try to drink one of the Bell's ones within the next week or two while this is fresh in my mind to do another comparison. I apologize, I'm like shaky because it's weird, I like cooled my body down. I was trying to warm this up. I put it in the freezer because I got home and I only had one beer before this, but I drank it slower than I was expecting. So by the time I pulled this out of the freezer, it wasn't frozen, but it was colder than a stout should be drunk in. So So I was using my hands to just wrap around it, try to warm it up over the last like 10 minutes or so. And now my fingers are like freezing. Yeah, it's interesting. And it goes to show that I guess KBS, people think that the base of KBS is Founders Breakfast Stout, but there's no way it is. Founders Breakfast Stout's like 8.3, and KBS is over 12% sometimes. And they're like, it's not gaining 50% more alcohol just from being barrel aged. It's not. The base of KBS, from what I've been told and everything, is either the same beer as Founders Imperial Stout or something close to it. Which makes perfect sense because it's just a much bigger beer. But when I smell this, I smell like the deep dark chocolate and the bourbon in KBS. It's some of that aroma I always attributed to the coffee, but apparently that's not the case because there's no coffee in this. I will say the bourbon, like not the flavor, but the actual spirit character is pretty strong. But it's pretty strong in KBS too. So I'm not going to hate on it. But so when I was saying that more of the beer stood out and the bourbon just played like an outside role, I was saying that more on the flavor rather than because there's significantly more of an alcohol burn to this than there is from the regular Founders Imperial Stout, but the actual flavor of the bourbon is not as strong as one would expect given the alcohol burn. So it's still letting the great flavors of the base beer come through. But I got 3 bottles of this. I'm gonna give one of them to one of my friends who is a huge like classic Imperial Stout fan. I'm gonna give one of these and one of the Bell's Barrel Age Expeditions to do a side by side. But so I'll have one more bottle after this. I'm probably going to try to get more of this, depending on how easily or hard it is to get it. It actually sold out at the brewery and the location in Detroit in like a half an hour. Now, granted, there was a 5 case limit. I'm guessing they didn't expect it to sell as quickly as it did. But it's funny because it sold out that fast. You would think there'd be like a high demand for it, but at the same time, I haven't seen anyone in any trade forums looking out for it. So I'm guessing it was just people who knew it was good and they're like, shit, I'm just gonna buy a bunch of this so I can have it to drink whenever. So yeah, obviously I just said I'm gonna try to get more of it. So this is absolutely a buy for me. And that's the other thing that I haven't even mentioned yet. The price on this is insane. This was $15 for a 6-pack. Not even a 4-pack, which would also be really cheap for something this good and this type of beer. It was $15 for a 6-pack. That's $60 a case. That's only, that's half. That's literally like almost half the price of KBS, which doesn't make any sense. Coffee isn't that expensive. So I get that they're huge now, but that is still this is a really, really great beer, and I'm gonna go after more of it. But for the price, it's one of the best beers I've ever had. To be honest, if you're doing a quality to price ratio, it's one of the best beers I've ever had. Because Expedition, by comparison, was like $25 for a 4-pack, which is still worth it because it's absolutely a great beer. But the price point on this is just ridiculous. So if you can find someone who you can get it for cost, absolutely go for it. Even above it, it's definitely worth it. This is a really, really good beer. But I think that's all I got on this one. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to doing the next one. Thanks.